I've got to stall for a few seconds while the thing warms up. But the thing is my technical term. So we're all flagging a bit. So mine will be fairly quick, I think. That was the plan anyway. So I've called it Reclaiming the Studio. This is a project that I was involved in a couple of years ago with a colleague. So I don't own all of this. I kind of came in as a, I guess, almost like a learning design consultant on this one. It was for a studio course based on design representation. So the students are learning about, the first year students are learning about how to draw, and it's mostly digital based. How to present their designs in digital form. So I had nothing to do with the content because I don't know anything about any of that, but I was able to assist in other ways. And it was a really good marriage between the two of us, I have to say. So the genesis occurred, we were having this whinge session about the problems we saw in first year, and all the students were rubbish, and nothing was performing properly and all that sort of thing. But we narrowed it down to two things that were main issues that we saw with particularly studio courses in first year. And that was the declining lecture attendance, because all of the studio courses were both split between lecture and studio. And we felt, that there was a bunch of us first year coordinators talking, we felt that that we're having a real issue with the quality of tutoring, and that being the interface between the students and their learning, rather than the actual course coordinator or the academic staff member. So that meant that we felt that the studio just wasn't functioning in first year at the school, and we really wanted to look for ways of getting around that. So I threw in this idea of flipping the classroom. It's something I've been reading about recently, and it surprised me because it took hold with Kevin Sweet, who we developed this course with, and he was really interested in pursuing it, and he did the legwork and getting the permission to change everything and to bring me on board as a co-coordinator, so that we're both responsible for delivering the course. So we wanted to get rid of the lectures, but still have the learning content that was important to them. So we wanted a way of delivering their content in a way that the students wanted to engage with. So we wanted the lectures to be primarily skill-based, so that when we asked the students why they weren't coming to lectures, they told us they just found it irrelevant. They weren't, what they're really looking for is instruction on how to do their coursework. They don't care about the rest, because they just want to get good grades. So in that sense, those inspirational design lectures were actually not fulfilling any function, because they couldn't make the connection to their own design work, and indeed they just weren't even going to them. So we wanted to address that. We wanted to make something more concentrated and convenient for the students, and something that was familiar to the way that they engage with knowledge, which is different to, I think, how we were at their age. So deleting the lectures was our first step in discussing this idea of flipping, and then second was not quite deleting the tutors, but removing them from being the prime interface with the content or the kind of learning that we were trying to get to happen. So, and this is the name of my presentation, Reclaiming the Studio. It's actually the academic staff member reclaiming the studio from the tutors, and getting in front of the students, and being that front person. And we did that through a number of ways. So one of the problems with the tutors is that they were pretty poorly trained. They had one training session which just covers the real basics of being a tutor, and I think that's something that the school needs to do something about, because we're using postgrad tutors for this work. And so what they would do is do that traditional thing where it's a desk crit, the students would hang around, have their 5 minutes and then leave. And that's a really low value use of studio time, or we felt it was at any rate. So we wanted to shift that. We wanted the studio to be an active place of collaborative learning and all those sorts of good things. Tasks set and led by the course coordinator. We get a consistency of message, because that was the other thing. One tutor would say one thing, another tutor would say another thing, and when it came to assessment time, the students were complaining because they weren't given the same message. Active learning tasks. Allowing the students to drive some of the stuff as well, so it's not all top-down stuff, but bottom-up as well. And the other things that came out of having the course coordinator back in the studio is that they can monitor the students and see what's happening, what's going wrong, what can be addressed in the next session or whatever, but also keep an eye on what the tutors are doing. It's interesting how often the tutors can check Facebook in a studio session, not just the students. So we felt that when we were looking at the options of what we could do, we felt that actually flipping the classroom in the way that we ended up doing it would address the main issues that we thought were there. So how did we do it? Well, we started right from the beginning, and I think you kind of have to when you change delivery method. So I'm very strong on constructive alignment, so that everything means something to the next piece of the course design, from the assessment to learning objectives and the content that goes with it. And I found afterwards, after we'd done this, that there was this thing called backwards design, which is exactly what we did. We started with the learning objectives. What do we want the students to get out of this course? And we worked backwards from there. So the learning objectives informed what the assessment was going to be. The assessment was going to give them a chance to demonstrate those learning objectives. Then the assessment, how could we teach them to do that assessment? Which content would they need and where would it be? And that's how we structured the course from the back end forward. And obviously everything constructively aligned in that way. And in the classroom, in the studio itself, was the basic active learning stuff that you probably know pretty well, but we're able to think carefully. So each studio, so we'd have the, we've got it on there. It's on the next slide. So we would have the 3 steps of learning content engagement. We'd have the pre-studio session content, which would be put online, and that was very short lectures, custom made to deliver information on the content that we were talking about that week. They were not recordings of someone standing in front and delivering to a class full of students, because we felt that was really low value and really hard to engage with in a digital point of view. So we tried to tailor-make stuff with using screen capture of demonstrations using software, slides, and trying to mix it up a bit. I think I really do think that replacing lectures with recordings of lectures is not really a viable way of making digital content available online. So we did that. So that was the first step. The students would have to engage with the online learning content. There were quizzes, low-value quizzes attached with that, just to encourage them to do it, but they were doing it anyway. Then we had the studio sessions, and then there was post-studio tasks as well. So it was that 3-pronged approach for each session. It turned out to be a lot more work for us than it did for the students. And in the studio, once you got into the studio, they've seen their videos, and these were typically 2 or 3 of no more than 10 minutes in length each. And we found we could cover the same material in this compact form, because you don't have to repeat stuff, or you don't have to labour points, because you know that the students are just going to stop and pause and go back, or use the material when they're doing the work, and it just becomes a lot more efficient for the students in that way. And we enjoyed the comment that one student made, that they enjoyed watching them on the bus on the way to school. So they had that real convenient, and they'd do that the morning before the class. And if they didn't do that, and in the class and they demonstrated that because they couldn't do a task, we just send them out to watch it and come back. In the class, we had probably 3 or 4 different studio tasks at different scales. This is all the varying stuff here, because we want to make the classes quite dynamic. So varying types of activities, varying scales of engagement, whether they're an individual task or a group task or a class task. and importantly, varying scales of instructor engagement. So the way we set up the class, the coordinator could address the whole class at a time and give these mini lectures in the class, or they could critique some work in the class to demonstrate certain things, or the class could work in smaller groups, or the students could work individually. So there's lots of different scales of engagement, and we mix it up in each session to keep things dynamic and keep them awake, keep them off their smartphones. And I just put a note here that we didn't really take a pure flipped approach, because there was homework. When you do a flipped classroom, you're supposed to have just the kind of equivalent of the lectures is what they're doing in their own time, and they're coming and doing tasks in the classroom. We had tasks outside the classroom as well. And at that point, I just say too that we never really felt that we're doing anything radical by this. We thought that by putting the instructor back in the studio was actually like things used to be, and you know, that kind of studio master kind of thing. So we weren't thinking about being radical, but just trying to be effective, I think. And the key to it, apart from the design of the course itself, was the design of the studio. So we've got this big open space, annoying columns through it, but we wanted a way that we could do those things where we varied the scale of engagement. And this is a class of 360 odd students, and we've streamed it, so we've got we deal in two different studio sessions, but there's still 180 odd students. So we really needed some help with doing all of these things from the actual design of the space itself. And does anyone know the MIT's iCampus? So they're using technology to enhance studio teaching. They're using, this is developed out of their science department, so it's scientists, introduction to physics and that sort of thing, actually doing architecture studio better than we've been doing it. So this is again reclaiming the studio back to where it belongs. Cluster seating arrangement, so that's not unusual. Centralized control station for the bridge, so you know, the captain at the bridge. Instead of having that at the front of the room for this kind of one-to-many arrangement, it's in the middle of the room. We want it in the middle of the room, it's not quite, but it's close. So it's real-time multiple direction screen sharing. I'm going to skip ahead to this is the MIT version. So we've got, that's your control bridge here, these are your, where your students sit, and you've got all of these monitors around, and so the students, it's not quite how we did it, but this, which is here, but it still doesn't show it very well. That's Kevin, by the way. You can tell it's a staged photo because we're in a jacket. So we have these clusters, and they're set up with a monitor for each cluster. And the monitor is linked with all of the other monitors and with the control bridge. And so I can send out what's on my screen to the monitor. The students, when we change the mode of the monitor, the students can, in their groups, can send stuff to the screen. And then I can see stuff that I want to share with the class when I bring it back to a whole of class discussion and put stuff from that screen all around the class and talk about that. So it's that linked kind of screen sharing that really allowed us to do, to work at the different levels that we were interested in. And that's at real time too. So if I'm doing we have a document camera here, so I can demonstrate a drawing, freehand perspective sketch or something like that. That's document cameras capturing that and sending it around to all of the monitors so we can actually demonstrate that. And amplified audio, because you need to bring back control of the class and you don't want one person shouting. So we're always mic'd up, and there's a central audio, a set of audio speakers that help to control that. So that's how MIT do it, and they're teaching sciences and all sorts of things in there now. And this TEAL, as they call it, Technology Enhanced Active Learning, is a model that they've exported to other universities in the US and abroad. and that's how we do it. And outcomes. Okay, so it was difficult for us to talk about whether our students were better after doing our course than they were last year in the previous course. It was a different project, and it's just too hard to do that in a competent way. But we felt they were, of course. But the class attendance was great. And that included watching the online material. So in a comparable course that also had online lectures and lectures, they had much worse attendance, both physical and watching the videos. So that was a tick for us, because that was one of the things we wanted to achieve. The second tick was there was much less reliance on the tutors, because we were there. We were, Kevin and I were circulating around the room. We, lecturing as you're talking, well, not lecturing, but talking to the whole group as you circulate around the room and looking at work and all sorts of things is really much more advantageous than the lectures theatre. But less reliance on the tutors. The tutors were being directed by us, and that direction was being fed to the students, and then we were there to pick up the pieces if they weren't. And it was rewarding interaction, not just for the students who we surveyed afterwards and asked them to think about it in terms of their other studio courses that were a more traditional approach, but rewarding for staff as well. And this is the first time that we'd actually talked to the students meaningfully about their work in a one-to-one in many instances, instead of just standing up and addressing everybody. And as I already mentioned, we did a survey, and the overall student favourability was quite high. There are, of course, warnings. So we did dedicated videos rather than just capturing recorded lectures, and that's very time consuming, especially if you want to get a good quality. And we really did try and get the best quality that we could as pure amateurs. But I think a lot of professional support could be directed at that to make more engaging learning content. Studio management was really draining. It was hard work, 3-hour sessions, 2 in a row. Hard work, but rewarded. And the design of the studio task was really challenging, but in a really intellectually stimulating way. And that was a lot of us, the two of us bouncing off each other for coming up with these tasks that would meet the objectives for what we wanted them to learn, but to engage them in self-learning as much as possible throughout that. And then also varying the scales of engagement to keep everything alive in the studio as well. And a teaching model that I find it hard to say that I'm not very evangelical about e-learning. I think it's something that you should use when it suits the outcomes that you want to achieve. So I don't think coming up with a model and then applying it wholesale across everything is necessarily the right thing to do. We tried doing this model in another first-year studio course with variable results. It just depends a lot on the staff who are delivering into it. Martin was one of them, but he did fantastic. But also the content of the course and everything, because that course wasn't redesigned from backwards like the experience we had with the course I'm talking about. So I don't think it's necessarily transferable, but perhaps it might be with further work. Opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities with this. It's not just about reclaiming the studios, but other things that can be achieved. So, for example, the potential to develop further into contemporary knowledge acquisition. So, how do students learn stuff these days? Are they doing it all on YouTube or Facebook or whatever? But we can start using these tools in the studio in a blended way with the technology-enhanced active learning environment. That allows a lot more scope for mixing things up. The opportunity to break down positivistic epistemology. What do I mean by that? So instead of this idea that we're inducting students into this body of knowledge that makes them an architect, and that denies a lot about who they are and what their backgrounds are in order to shape them to become us. This, I'm not saying that it's necessarily the best thing to do, but it's possible to actually start letting the students drive the content a lot more in this kind of interactive environment. So that's an opportunity. Of course, authentic task-based approaches and real-world engagement, as we try and do in Studio, can be enhanced this way as well. And I like the idea of collaborating with other campuses in similar ways as well. And I'm sure you can think of a million other ways that could be useful. And that's all I wanted to say.
Now, I might do a little bit of rearranging myself. Now, Emmett's got something we'll have to do a little bit of a connecting here. So if I put you over here, Michael, and you can answer any questions while we get Emmett's then connected here. So yeah, questions for Michael? Questions?
I've got a cohort size question really. How many people are in that first year studio? That's
at a time, about 180 if they all show up. But we're working in much smaller groups most of the time. So it doesn't always feel like a big class, but you know those moments when the whole class is working productively on a task is absolutely, it's just like sublime. You hear that small chatter of activity, and you walk around and see stuff you've done. And that's not something that I'd seen in Studio for a long time. The whole class working.
Were they all in that one space?
Yeah.
So you didn't need to pick up another room or anything?
No, I don't.
We've got a lot of spaces like that occurred, but none of them can take 180 people. That's a space problem that we have.
You talked a little bit about student satisfaction. What about student outcomes?
But there were no words, so we did no harm, I think. But as I mentioned, it's really hard to evaluate them against a different project or.
Well, I guess because you started off with identified problems with the previous iteration, do you think you were able to address them? The two problems, yes. Yeah. Whether it improved their learning is hard. The actual learning outcome, which is why we're here, it is really hard to, we found really hard to test. And the other thing is too, when you're marking a cohort, you tend to mark it relative to that year's project. You're not thinking necessarily of benchmarking it backwards.
We might, one more question.
I actually just wanted to clarify for myself. It is design studio course, and then you actually had one particular project where you started from learning outcomes and...
No, it was the whole course.
Okay.
The whole course. It was design representation taught in Studio, but it was the whole trimester-long course.
Okay, so it was design representation.
All right.